Rica has become known as one of the most expensive countries in Central America, yet it is still a place that is highly attractive to live for many, especially in the past few years. And I've seen my fair share of visitors coming here and looking at the prices in grocery stores and making videos and crying about the prices of cheese and other imported products and, well, in general, many things, not just at grocery stores. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're here visiting, you're probably going to have a little bit of a different set of needs and standards as compared to when you are actually here and have decided to make the move. So with that and my 5 years of experience of living in Costa Rica, we are here today to talk about the cost of living in Costa Rica. Hey guys, I hope you're all doing very well. Welcome back to Emma in Costa Rica. And let's just dive right into this today because I do not feel like blabbing on because we've got a lot to talk about. So let's start by talking about housing. As with anywhere in the world, houses and apartments are generally going to have a large price range, and this is mainly related to your needs and standards of living. And the biggest factors for your home pricing are generally going to be the location, the size, and the amenities. Now, of course, if you decide you want to live right into a touristic hotspot or an area that is considered to be more or less Americanized, then you're naturally going to have that affected in the cost of where you're living. And this is for a few different reasons. Basically, you're going to have more activity and access to things around you. The apartment itself could actually have specific features that might be suited or something that maybe foreigners may be considered to desire more, and the view, and of course the location. And yes, that's always going to be a factor. If there's a view, it could be from a luxury standpoint or from a tax standpoint, because I'm pretty sure here in Costa Rica, if you have a nicer view or a specific property, you are naturally going to get taxed more. And I'm not sure if that's normal worldwide. Not an expert in property things, but yeah. One last reason that could affect the cost of your housing here in Costa Rica is simply because you are who you are. And now this is super unfortunate, but it does tend to happen here in Costa Rica, where a lot of people are going to know you're not from here, and some locals can actually see this as a risk at times, because you could be a tenant who happens to just leave the country and you lose contact with the owner and you just never get the rent paid. That's always going to be a risk factor when you're living in a foreign country. Another reason would be simply because the owner of an apartment might think that you will just simply pay the amount that they tell you. I'm not telling you to go and try bargaining for an apartment, but I'm just warning you that it does happen where costs do get raised a little bit if they think that you probably have the money to pay for it. So don't be surprised there. And yeah, with that, like, it's really just up to you if you are willing or not to pay the amount that they are asking for. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it might not be. Now, I have had experience with both options, one being my current apartment. If you haven't seen the apartment tour video, go check that out. I'll put the link up here. And where we are now, we are paying $325 per month for a 2-bedroom with a huge backyard. Well, not really huge, but a nice backyard. Internet, cable, and water is all included in that. And we also have air conditioning in the bedroom, which seems to not be working right now. But this apartment does not come with hot water. One thing that some may consider as a negative is that this apartment is a little bit further out from where I used to be. So I'm about 20 minutes away from the main downtown, and that would be in bus. But the thing is that this place has so many positive features that it makes up for that one or two negative things, really. And on the other hand, when I was living in Manuel Antonio, which was right in the touristic hub, with bus access, a variety of restaurants and shops, and the beach just steps away, that apartment was $850 a month, and it had 3 bedrooms, water and internet included. However, the internet never seemed to work, so we ended up having to get our own, which was about $50 a month or so. And I was constantly under fire from the owners, who seemed to think that charging a high rent price meant that they could treat their tenants like absolute garbage, but that's something for a whole nother video. And all the bedrooms had air conditioning, so 3 air conditioning units, and hot water was on the menu. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, those are really actually quite low prices. But once you're actually living here, you'll see how quickly the money can tend to disappear. But yeah, we'll get on to the next point. Bills. Well, as I mentioned, some apartments have air conditioning and hot water, others don't. Of course, these are luxuries that may be necessary for many. And if you can find an apartment that has both, you might be asking how much it will cost to use them. Well, of course, the answer is naturally gonna be, it depends on your usage. I personally only use my air conditioning at nighttime because I am, of course, still a penguin at heart, and the sweet hum, along with a nice fan, really cancels out the sound of all the howling dogs. For nightly usage, let's say from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., Luis and I pay about $35 to $75 a month, and that's also going to include all of the usual electricity usage, such as washing our clothing 2 to 4 times a week, to binge watching all 8 Harry Potter movies in a week. We have also recently purchased a separate shower head that actually has a little switch that turns the water hot from cold, and that is run off electricity. So depending on how often we use it, it does increment the bill by about $10 to $20. So we try not to use it too often, which, I mean, it's pretty easy to not use it because it's been so hot lately anyways. I mean, why would you want to take a hot shower? But yeah, so that makes our electricity bill anywhere between $35 minimum to, I'd say, about $95 max. So luckily for me, I have never had an apartment where I personally need to pay the water. It's always been covered for me. But from what I've heard of, it is fairly well priced, and technically speaking, according to the AEA, well, I don't even know how to say this in English. AEA. It's like the potable agua and sewage treatment company, whatever. It's between 77 cents per 1,000 liters up to $1.79 per 1,000 liters, depending on the quantity of water you are consuming. You can do the math. So something else that you're really going to want to consider doing is getting a cell phone plan. Otherwise, you're just going to end up paying crazy roaming fees and be like a slave to any place that gives free Wi-Fi. So it just doesn't really make any sense, and it's fairly easy to do. All you have to do is go to a corner store or a supermarket and get one of those prepaid cards, and you can literally load it with however much money you want. Some might have a limit of how little you can put, and then you activate it and you should be good to go. It's basically just a SIM card. Another way that you could do it is actually go and get a phone plan with ICE or Colby or Claro. There's a few different ones, Liberty, there's so many now. And that will end up being cheaper than getting a prepaid card, because I find that the data on the prepaid cards kind of gets sucked up very quickly. So yeah, for a phone plan, what I personally am paying right now is about 14,000 colones, so that's like what, like less than $30 for 10 gigabytes. Plus, certain plans will give you free social media usage up to a certain amount of gigs and blah, blah, blah. So for me, it's perfect. And it's much cheaper than a phone bill that I would have been paying in Canada. So not bad at all. All right, so now we're getting on to the delicious part. Food. This is where it's going to be completely up to you. You can choose to buy imported goods that are going to be much more costly, or you can try to keep it local and it will be, well, less costly. I'd say on average I spend about $400 per month on groceries, and this is going to be for 2 people. And when I say groceries, I mean everything, like laundry soap, body soap, shampoo, food, canned food, fresh food, whatever you want, it's all under that umbrella. And once again, it's going to depend completely on where you're shopping as well. Yes, there are more tourist-friendly supermarkets that raise the price solely for that reason. And you also have the option to shop at the lower priced markets, such as Pali, Maxi Pali, Más por Menos, but Pali is going to be cheapest. Where, you know, the quality might not be the best of the best, but it's still not significantly, you know, like there's not a huge difference at the end of the day. except for when you look at the bill. You also won't be able to find nearly as many imported products in Pali, Maxi Pali, these kind of places. You know, they'll have sort of like the more popular brands and the more basic products, but yeah, a lot of imported items you're probably not going to find there. And again, this is strictly just talking about groceries, because if you plan on going out to restaurants and bars all the time, you can easily expect to pay between 2 to 3 times more than the amount that I'm saying, because well, that's a given anywhere, especially if you're in a touristic area. But you can find local restaurants that are called sodas, where you can get a typical dish for around $5 or so, depending on where you are. All right, so let's talk about transportation. When it comes to getting around, this can actually be a little bit costly. Hopping on a bus for longer distance travels it's pretty fairly priced, but just getting on like a quick bus ride it's still gonna cost you less than a couple dollars, usually about $1 or so, depending on how far you're going and what bus route. However, to get to, say, San Jose from Quepos is approximately $10. So in my opinion, for a 3-hour trip, it's pretty worth it. If you were to do the same thing in car, you can expect to pay about $30, depending on the gas prices in the moment and what car you're using, of course. Taxis are going to be another option, but depending on where you are, it could be that there's not going to be too many, especially in the non-touristic areas, whereas in the touristic areas there's going to be quite a few, but you're going to pay the price for it. You could also hop in a pirata, which is more nicely termed as colectivo taxi, which is basically when a driver will stop and pick up multiple people who need a ride along a specific route, and they'll charge a similar price to what the bus would charge. But I don't really recommend this either, mainly because one, it's totally illegal, and 2, it can cause a holdup if the traffic police happen to see and stop you, and now you have to pretend you're somebody's friend that you have no idea who they are. There's also a lot less control over your safety. Yeah, many times the drivers might not even have a license or have a car that should be on the road. So yeah, use your common sense with that one. Aside from taxis, piratas, bus, and all that, there are Uber cars in certain areas of Costa Rica. Again, it's illegal still, so it could cause you a holdup in some moment if you're trying to get somewhere in a rush. The prices are pretty good, if you can even get one. I know in San Jose I've used them quite a few times, and I've seen other people use them even in Quepos, but I don't think it's very good because there's like one person who just like does all of them, so it's very rare that they're available or, you know, actually working. Yeah, I've also heard quite a few sketchy stories, especially for the ones in San Jose at nighttime and everything. So again, this is something that I would probably avoid and either stick to public transportation or hired transportation or your own car. Okay, so now moving on to healthcare. When it comes to healthcare in Costa Rica, your care will more or less depend on your status in the country. If you're living here as a tourist, then you can either pay for a private doctor, you may decide to have travel insurance, and you could also sign up for a private health system such as the Metropolitano, which is a subscription-based service that allows you to get appointments with a variety of specialists for a lower cost as long as you pay the monthly subscription fee. This is what I do. Luis and I pay about $40 a month, and each specialist has its own special price, but we do get a lower price on those. And of course, you can still make the appointments with these same specialists if you don't pay the subscription, but you will end up paying more. So talking about healthcare in Costa Rica as a whole, it is technically given to the citizens for free if you are registered in the Caja, which is like the social security, and naturally as a citizen you are going to be registered with that. I think this is a very similar system to how it was or is in Canada, where they say that it's free, but they always take out a part of your taxes from working or your taxes from home and blah blah blah, and that will be the reason why the healthcare is free. As for foreigners who become residents, I believe it kind of depends on the type of residency you have, but I haven't personally gotten that far in my experience, so I'm not going to give an answer there just so I don't tell you guys something incorrect. But if any of you guys know the costs or the situation of healthcare for expatriates in Costa Rica, please do share in the comments. I'm sure, well, I would love to know, and I'm sure there's other people who would love to know as well. There's also pharmacies all over the place here. Depending on what you need, you can potentially skip the doctor. And a bonus thing about the pharmacies here, or even supermarkets, if you just need to buy a couple of pills, like painkillers or cold and flu meds, you can actually buy them separately here. They'll break the boxes open and sell the pills separately, so you don't have to go and buy an entire box if you don't want to. As for dental care, there is a range of pricing, of course, but I do believe it's cheaper than in North America. However, for a basic cleaning, in the past I have paid about $50 and about the same amount for a cavity filling. So yeah, not bad. Okay guys, so we are down to the final point. The final cost of living point that I do want to mention may or may not apply to every single person, but I do think it's important enough to mention to you guys, and this would be your visa costs. Living in Costa Rica means you also have to leave the country every 90 days in order to renew your visa, unless you're a resident or a soon-to-be resident. This is one of the costs of living that actually made my life quite difficult in many times, basically. No matter how you look at it, it's going to be expensive because you basically need to get to the airport or drive to one of the borders. So that's going to be at least $10 to about $100 or more just in traveling to exit the country, because the $10 is going to be the lowest option on the bus, and the $100, I mean, it could go even higher depending on how you plan on driving around and how much gas is at the time, and etc, etc. So that's going to be just that. And then you also have to consider any costs that might come up to enter the country that you're going to be going into. And then you also have to consider if there's any flights involved. Will you have to fly to another country? My personal favorite was always flying out to Guatemala because the flights are about $100, 100 to go and then 100 to come back. But then with that, you also have to consider where are you going to stay for a night or two? What are you going to eat for a night or two? And then you also have to have a ticket when you are re-entering Costa Rica to show that you are leaving again. And so luckily there are flight companies where you can kind of just keep pushing forward your flight, and I took advantage of that for many years. But yeah, it's very expensive at the end of the day. You can look to spend between $200 and $500 every 3 months. So, you know, maybe some people might not think that's a huge deal, but it's definitely something to factor in when you are considering cost of living in Costa Rica. Okay, so I believe we have gone over all of the major details. So when it comes down to living in Costa Rica and the general monthly cost, let's start summing it up. So my rent is $325 a month, groceries coming in at $400 a month. We've got our bills at $35 to $95 a month if we can find a place with internet and hot water. If not, expect another $80 to $100. Transportation, let's say about $50 a month, even though this number is extremely variable. And for healthcare, well, it's not like I go to the doctor and dentist every single month. So let's say if I were to average it out, it's about $30 a month, including pharmacy bills and all that fun stuff. So this leads to a total of $840 to $900 US a month. And lucky for me, I share my apartment and my groceries and my bills with somebody. So that brings my cost down to about $460 to $500 a month. Now, again, your cost of living is such an unpredictable number with so many dependent factors, but this is my personal experience, and by no means am I perfect. I have months where I decide I want to eat out much more than usual, or I decide to splurge on some different imported wines, cheeses, and salamis, because that does rack up the bill pretty quickly. I have also had to learn to live a little bit differently. You know, really, I live here now. I don't live like a Canadian anymore. I still have certain ways of spending, and you know, it's hard to change your life that much, but I have learned to reel myself in quite a bit, and it's nice to appreciate the staple foods and try to get the most of what you already have on hand, right? Anyways, if you guys have any questions or an experience that you would like to share with us all, please do let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to see more videos about Costa Rica and my life down here. And let's connect on Instagram. Come and find me. I'll put my handle right up here. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very, very soon. Ciao!